I love exploring Britain's food history and recreating long-lost dishes. So when I heard about an old recipe that preserves our maritime heritage, I was straight on the case. Much has been written about the origins of British baking, so imagine my surprise when a recipe I've enjoyed many times before turned out to have much more behind it than I knew. This is Whitehaven in Cumbria, where I hope to explore the origins of this luxurious tart. It contains rum, dates, apricots, and goes by the name of Cumberland Rum Nicky. Something that's always confused me is why it's called a Nicky and not a tart or a pie. Wow.
Absolutely superb, isn't it?
What a view. Anne Cook has been studying Whitehaven's local history for years.
This actually was the second biggest port in England.
The second biggest port in England? That was the second biggest port in England?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had bathtubs bigger than that. I mean, what happened to Liverpool? I mean, Liverpool was obviously just down the road, but this at the time was the biggest. But this is the one.
This is where all the merchants were in. It wasn't a planned port, but it was added onto all the time and extended as the town got bigger. And you can see we've got 4 or 5 lighthouses. And, you know, they were added on, and then another arm came out and another lighthouse and things like that.
Looking at it now, it's hard to imagine that in the 1800s, Whitehaven was a cargo capital of England, the destination for the tall ships sailing from the Caribbean. They were filled with ingredients that fed Britain's growing taste for exotic fruits and spices. Amazingly, the Whitehaven Town Archives contain ship's records from those times. This is an inventory of what was brought in. Now, this is in 1861. They're bringing in sugar, tick. They're bringing in rum, obviously, because these guys are rum traders. But they're also bringing in preserves. Now, that's the killer blow for me. Now, that would have been your apricots, that would have been your dates. The family would have had the flour. Well, they're all the key ingredients for making a rum Nicky. So, the 18th century merchants of the Caribbean were importing the rum and fruits needed for the Cumberland Rum Nicky. But they must have been exotic and expensive. Jefferson's were one of the main shipping companies at the time, and their original offices are still here in Whitehaven, preserved as a museum. The museum manager is Phil Hazelhurst.
This is the heart of the Jefferson's empire. From here, they ran a worldwide business.
How did it all start for them?
Originally, back in the early 1700s, they were doing wine, spirits, champagne, and various other things. But what they wanted to do after 1780, when Henry took over from his father, he bought this place and he wanted to get into rum and sugar.
Do you know, when they came back to Whitehaven with the rum and the sugar, and I noticed they also had things like preserves. Can I ask you if they had 2 things?
Yes.
2 key things. They're important. One of them's dates, and the other one is apricots.
Well, certainly dates, because without dates you couldn't have some of the dishes that are so known with Cumbria today.
The Cumberland Rum Nicky, which alleged to have come from here.
Alleged? Of course it came from here. Where else is it going to come from? This was the premier harbour. This was the M1 to the destination. This was a nexus that meant that Cumberland Rum Nicky was basically just... It had to be made here. There was nowhere else on the planet it could have been made.
For the Jeffersons, their imported goods made them wealthy and prosperous. But for the everyday people of Whitehaven, things were far less rosy. I know that the sailors didn't get paid a lot of money. The overall conditions of them living in Whitehaven must have been quite squalid.
We're talking about houses stacked one on top of the other, 2 rooms, 12, 14 people in there, no water, no sanitary facilities. There would have been absolutely no way of not being able for disease to spread. I mean, she probably wanted to go on a ship and see the world and get some fresh air in your lungs, really. The
story is the family of the sailors were actually producing the tart for them for their return journey. The point is, how did it get from the ship to their houses?
Well, I think sailors have sometimes been famous for having large hands. And I mean, you've got to remember the title of the pudding you were talking about there. It was because it was nicked. So you have Cumberland Rum Nicky.
So that's why it's called a Nicky. It seems that a bit of pilfering piracy went on as the sailors nicked these exotic and pretty expensive ingredients and took them home to their excited families. But to try and prevent all this pilfering, these were built, the bond cellars. I can't see them taking it from here. It's too difficult.
Once it comes into here, it's Fort Knox. It's been signed in, it has to be signed out by the taxman. It had to be purloined while it's still on the ship or in transit to here.
So basically, it was nicked from the ship coming up to here. Someone's probably been paid off and said, do you want your... I've just dropped one off there, mate. There you go. For his buddy.
It dropped off the back of a dray.
Well, that's it. The unique story behind Whitehaven's Cumberland Rum Nicky. The locals must be dead proud of it. Hello.
Hello.
Cumberland Rum Nicky. Do you know what it is?
Cumberland Rum
Nicky. Have you heard of a Cumberland Rum Nicky? Never heard of it. Cumberland Rum Nicky. Do you know what it is? Have you ever heard of one, no? You've never heard of one?
No. I'm from Whitehaven.
You don't know what it is?
I don't know one.
OK, fair enough. Thank you very much.
That's absolutely
Thanks,
brilliant.
buddy. Do you know what a Cumberland Rum Nicky is?
A what?
Yeah.
Cumberland... Yeah. Where am I going to find one? Where's the nearest place you think I'll find one?
I bet he's got them.
At last, someone is making Whitehaven's pudding. Oh, great. This is the place they said could have the Cumberland Rum Nicky. All over the place, trying to find somebody. We find somebody, tell us where it is. What happens? It's closed. Brilliant. To be honest, it probably is too far back in time to really say for certain exactly how a tart like this was created. But I don't care if it's a myth or not. It's a great story. It's a tart that's been made using the contents of an 18th century ship to celebrate the return of the sailors that have been away at sea. I, for one, I'm looking forward to making one. I had an exhausting day up in Whitehaven, and it's good to see you again, Phil. You're all right.
I am.
I'm glad to see you brought some of that rum with you.
Well, we didn't think we'd had enough last time.
Well, no, we haven't. There's a glass. Could you, I'll have a little bit, please.
Just the honours.
Yeah, an honest drop. What surprised me when I started talking to the people was the amount of people that didn't know what a Cumberland Rum Nicky actually was.
It is that endangered pie. It's a little bit brown looking. It's very, very rich, and people probably think it's not very healthy for them. But you don't need a huge amount to get a really good boost of flavour.
I've got a little job for you. There's a pair of scissors there, and there's some dates. Can you just basically, what I want you to do is just cut little pieces off like that and just put them in there for me.
Certainly.
And when you've done it, just add a little bit of that rum, just a little capful, and just give it a little bit of a stir for me. Now, what I'm going to show you is the dish that we've been trying to find out all about in Whitehaven, and it's the Cumberland Rum Nicky. For all you people out there in Whitehaven that I spoke to, and I asked you, what's a Cumberland Rum Nicky? Well, I'm about to show you. You need to rejuvenate this in your area. Now, to start with, I've got some butter, which I'm going to put straight into the bowl. And then just beat this, just soften it up a little bit, which is perfect. Just room temperature's fine. Then I'm going to add some dark muscovado sugar. Mix this together. I'm a decent baker, and rather than nick my preserved fruit off a ship, I bought it from a shop. But these chopped apricots and this crystallised ginger, they are pretty much what the tall ships brought to Whitehaven. How are you getting on? Oh, you beauty.
Few more than that?
It's potent, that. That's grand, that is. OK, we'll just throw that in there as well. And then you mix all these ingredients together. I'm going to get my hands in there. Now, I love the fact that it was probably called the Nicky because they nick the stuff.
That's right, yes.
I thought that was fantastic.
I was interested to see that you use the dark sugar in that as well,
Yeah.
because that'll give you more of that molasses texture to it as well.
Exactly. It's almost that malty flavour that I want to see sort of riding through it. And then the ginger sort of hits you and goes bang, and then the rum just goes buh, because you're going to get this wave
I mean, you
of
can
flavours
see why
coming through.
it would make a perfect Christmas dish,
Yeah.
because it's warming as well as luxurious.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, I obviously need to prepare the pastry for this. So a basic sweet pastry is 3, 2, 1, OK? 3 flour, 2 butter, 1 sugar. That's generally how you make a pastry. And then you may add an egg or a little bit of water. So I need a little bit of flour. So I'm just going to roll out the pastry. I want it to be quite thin because I want that pastry to be quite crispy when I break through. So lift up your pastry, chuck it on the plate, and then take it all the way down. Just tuck it in so you don't get too much spring back. Because it's on a slight ridge, it will shrink back a little bit. So once I've done that, I'm just going to run a knife around the outside just to trim it off. I remember doing this with pies years ago, one of my favourite jobs. So there we have it, one lined plate. The filling is going to go in now as well. So we take a big scoopful of that.
Now, this is the one, of course, that could upset some people because you have a pie and people tend to say, oh, well, you blind bake or you'll do it off first.
No, not at all. The only reason, do you know the reason why you blind bake a pie? The main reason why you blind bake a pie?
Well, usually if you put in a wet filling or something in it, is it? Or...
But what does that cause?
Oh, not a soggy bottom.
Oh, yes. It creates a soggy bottom. So at this stage, because the ingredients are not particularly wet, you're going to get away without getting too much of a soggy bottom.
The bit of pastry you save will become the lid, but this will be no ordinary pie lid.
Now, what I'm doing here is just cutting strips off, which is going to form the lattice work on the top.
That's really the most delicate part of the pie when you think about it.
It probably is. I mean, to be honest, yeah, you're probably right. So the best way to do it, I feel, is if you get some paper, start placing your strips on there.
And continue by alternating between horizontal and vertical until you've got a woven effect. This is a great technique for any pie, allowing you to get a sneaky peek at the filling inside.
Why do we have a lattice top on some pies?
The main reason is for decoration. It's purely decorative. Once you've done that, you end up with a basic lattice work. If you put a bit of pressure down the outside to try and seal it together, and then what you want to try and do is basically, this is a tricky bit, is flip it onto the top of the pie. So you grab it, flip it over.
Oh, that deserves a round of applause.
And then you neaten it all off. So you take a bit of time, just straighten it all off, and then pinch all around the edge where it overlaps, just to force it down. And again, you trim it around the outside. So you go from that, which you bake in an oven for about 25 minutes at 200 degrees C, and you end up with this. There you have your Cumberland Rum Nicky.
I'm not sure how they served it in the 19th century, but I'd suggest you serve it warmed with a little rum butter on the side.
Whitehaven, I hope you're watching.
Looking forward to that.
Phil, you'll have to wait a little bit longer to try it.